gonna go do my scrubs.
Oh,
Yeah, boy.
yay.
Yay.
Okay, if you've got a microphone, please go ahead and mute it. And we've got quite a few of us. We are getting started just a little bit early, as I usually do, and it is a turning into that bad weather they told us it was going to happen. So I wanted to cover a few things with us, just some housekeeping preliminary before we get to roll, before we start rolling. And we're over here in module 3, or week 3, if you will. And I want to make sure that you're reminded you've got a quiz on Friday that's due. And then you also have XLS 4 and XLS 5, and you should have uploaded those already, the workshop credits, okay? Now, as I had mentioned, I will usually be working ahead in the workshops so that I can front load things so that when we get near the end of the course, I can give you flex time that allows you time to work on some of the projects as well as the final exam period. So we are going to be kind of working ahead, and that shouldn't throw you. Now, I also want to make sure that I clarify to everybody who hears this, whether you're listening to it now or whenever. Again, I want to restate the attendance assumptions, and I'm going to be doing this because we're going to be coming upon week 6 or week 7, and that becomes a point where I have to do some serious analysis of whether people are actually attending class or not, or if they're missing class, okay? Here's the deal. Attendance means you have come in and viewed a live stream, whether it's ground-based or virtual like it is today, or if you didn't do that, you logged into Canvas and saw the class session before noon of the next day. All right, that means you've counted as attendance, and I can go in and see who's logged, and I'll be having to do that when I start to take, when the registrar sends her 6 or 7 week email out and says, who's not attending your class. So please make sure that you're doing that. This is set up for everybody's convenience. The ground-based session, I'm hoping to see more people than I have been, but again, that's how the attendance, having attended class is defined. All that being said, we're going to move on forward here, and we're going to take a look at XLS 6. So the cases that are associated with that are XLS 6 is down here in week 4. So today I'm going to cover XLS 6, and we're going to look at using goal seek, and then we're also going to look at break-even analysis, and we're going to do that with both of those cases. Now, you have a key that you can upload, all right? But I also have the resources file. Let me diminish this down, and I'll open up the resources for the Microsoft Excel cases. And here for XLS 6, this is the use of assumptions, break-even analysis, and charting. And we'll talk a little bit about charting, not a whole lot, but just a bit. And then the resources we're going to use is one of my old cases. I've tweaked it, worked with it for a long time, and it's Badger Jams, and it's XLS 6 Badger Jams Spring 17. And you will find it in the Files section of Canvas, all right? And then here's the file from the Winston textbook, and it's called Lemonade GS. And it's covered in chapter 18, and I have that file loaded in the files, that single file there in the files area, okay? And so you could use the key that I've got loaded today to upload for your workshop credit. You could upload Badger Jams, or you could upload the Lemonade GS file. any of those three is fine. They provide demonstrated proof that you were in the workshop. Okay, an outcome of the workshops, and that file is from the Excel companion content one. It's that zip file. All right. All that being said, so we know the resources we're using and why we're doing what we're doing, etc. And so I'm going to start today with Badger Jams. Now I had uploaded it there in Canvas for you, but I've also got it, of course, here on my desktop, and I'm going to open it up and let's talk about it, because we're going to look at a very important principle in business, and it's this notion of break-even analysis. And how do we do it? Okay. And then I'll show you the chart I've developed with the case and just some tips on how do you figure out. The truth is, when I see a chart in a file, I go, man, that's fantastic. I save the file and then I go back and I kind of reverse engineer and I see how they did what they did. And it's easy to do that in Excel. So don't let this chart over here throw you. Now, also, you'll notice it is beautifully simple. It says what it means. It means what it says. It's clear. This is a good chart, okay? And a well-developed chart. Also, I've used I put to use conditional formatting to show the kind of range of outcomes. This spreadsheet has all the components it should have. Every spreadsheet or worksheet should have. What am I doing here? Okay, and then it should also have an identification documentation area. Then it should have an assumptions area, and here's the assumptions area, pardon me. And if I wanted to, I could put some nice fill in there to direct my eye to it, okay, if I care to do that. And maybe a nice really light green or a really light blue, to just so I can tell that it's the assumptions area. And then I have the outcome, I have the output area, calculation and output area. We also make use of the name manager. And I'll click on data formulas, and there's the name manager. And we have our key variables all, and we'll see that we use it in the formulas. As I've said before, it's a little tedious when you do this. The variables will stay the same. The numbers may change, but at least when you use them in a formula, you're using human speak, not computer speak. All right. That being said, we'll look at this a little bit more. And we're going to talk about this notion of break-even analysis. What is that all about? Break-even analysis is a simple proposition. I try to forecast how much I'm going to need to sell in order to break even. I don't make money, but I don't lose money. Or I can use break-even analysis that's called units or volume. I can also use break-even dollars, where I say, okay, how much revenue do I need to generate to break even? I don't think it is intuitively as obvious as the break-even units or volume. This is all based upon what we call the total cost equation, where total cost equals variable cost plus fixed costs. Okay? You say, all right, what do you mean? Well, this case walks us through some of that process, where it walks through all of us. Here I have an area called the fixed costs. They're called fixed costs because they don't change. And I have, for this entrepreneur who's selling jams, cases of jams, I think is what they were selling, rent, advertising, a commercial stove, cooking equipment, and those are the total fixed costs. Now, these costs, let's say that this person is starting this company. These are also known as sunk costs. These are costs I have to spend, okay, before I ever sell one unit. Before I ever sell one unit. Then we have variable costs. And let's come down here and let's look at those. Okay. Preparation and packaging, shipping, and that gives me the total variable costs. Variable costs, and these are on a per unit basis. Variable costs change with the level of business activity. All right. For example, if I open a store and I do one level of volume with 3 employees, and then my volume doubles, and so I've got to hire another person, or maybe 2. I certainly have to have more inventory. Those are variable costs. Okay, and that leads us to a thing called contribution margin, and I'll show you that. Let's look at this contribution margin. Let's click on it and see what it's telling us. The contribution margin equals the sale price, this is on a per unit basis, minus the total variable costs. Let's look at that. $39.95 minus $17.55 gives me $22.40. The contribution margin is the money I have to pay towards my fixed costs. Now, if all is well, I will have enough revenue per unit and costs such that I pay my fixed costs, I cover my contribution margin, and I still have some money, and I still have some profit per unit left over. Okay? So we're saying, okay, I'm going to cover, for each unit I sell, I've got to cover the costs it takes to prepare it and send it. I also have to pay these fixed costs, so I have a place to put the jam together, package it, and do all that work, and I have to have advertising. Okay? And this leads me to the break-even units. And the break-even units is total fixed costs divided by the contribution margin. That's break-even units. And in this situation, I've got to sell 1,147 units of jam in order to break even. Now, I want to show you one other variable over here that usually isn't included in the total cost equation because it's not formally part of it, but it's important. And that's what I call the entrepreneur's investment. In this case, this individual is going to sell jam. They're going to buy all this equipment, rent a place, get a cooking equipment and a stove, all this stuff, advertise, and they're going to take their savings and use part of it to live on. So they're quitting their job and they're going to do this. Now, over the years, I've had students ask me, Dr. Harmon, I'd like to go into business for myself. All right, what do you think? Typically, let me give you a statistic, and you've probably heard it before. About 80% of all new businesses fail. That's because starting a business and running a business well is far more difficult than people perceive. Okay? Now, I can tell you, and look, I know there are people on the Shark Tank, or whatever they call that show. There are people out there who've made billions of dollars, who've built billion-dollar companies. They've never had a day of college. they've never been to business school. That's because they're not normal human beings. They just intuitively understand things. The rest of us are humans who've got to go to business school and figure this stuff out. Okay? That's just how it is. It's the same thing as like, I'm probably not material for the NBA. There's a reason. I don't have the DNA. Okay? I don't have the hand-eye coordination. So no matter how much I practiced and worked out, etc., I'm not going to make it. Michael Jordan, on his worst day, was better than 80% of the guys in the NBA. LeBron James, on his worst days, probably better than half the players who play professional basketball because he has the gift. He's a freak of nature. Adrian Peterson, great OU running back. He was a freak of nature, man. He was the size of a tight end, but he had the speed of a sprinter. The guy's a freak. So you and I have to learn this the hard way. So I tell folks who say, I'd like to own my own business, look, you can go one of two directions. Well, really one of three. You can try this and get it started as your day job. Keep your day job and do it at night. Okay? And try to build it. All right? My uncle manufactured clocks. He loved it, and he learned how to make them and put them together in the evenings and the weekends when he was working. And then when he retired, and he had a pretty decent pension, he went into business. He sold in tons of clocks, gave them away, and that was his thing. Now, the other route is to become a franchisee. If you are going to have a franchise from McDonald's or Burger King or any of these big people, listen, they're going to ask you, first of all, do you have enough money to get in the game? Second, are you willing to go through our training program so you do it exactly like we do it so we know that you meet our standards? And if you do, and you're good, you'll probably end up fairly well off. Now, you'll work very hard, but chances are you may have them come to you or whoever the franchisor is and say, look, I've got 3 other units and they're dying. Can you save them? Okay. So let me also encourage you to do this. And I know that we have a program here in entrepreneurship. And I also know that we have some courses like starting the entrepreneurial venture and that stuff. Listen, go find somebody who started a business and been successful. I'm going to tell you this. Business people love to tell stories. How do you know? Listen to me. If you sit in a class with me, probably your eyes are on the back of your head when I can't see it, when I start telling you one of my war stories. I do so because I've lived a little, I have a little wisdom to impart to you, and better you hear it here now and make a mental note than go out and repeat the mistake I might have made or people I know who might have made. My parents were entrepreneurs, so I have a fairly good understanding of that piece of it. But also, when I started my career, I worked at Southeast Missouri State University over in Cape Girardeau. As a business faculty member, I worked in what they called a small business development center. We also had a small business institute, and we worked with people, small businesses, people who were trying to start a company or had a small business and they were trying to survive. And so that was a challenge because, we were faculty members and we were dealing with people in the real world. So we found out very fast that the real world's a lot more messy and complicated than people anticipate or imagine than the textbooks. And those folks out in the real world learn, hey, those textbooks and those ideas and theories have a lot to say. Okay? And that's part of that. Business is both a science and an art. Well, to wrap that piece of this up, I learned a lot. And over the years, and those 5 years especially when I was there, I would discuss with my dad a lot about I wouldn't disclose anything confidential, but we'd talk about somebody I was dealing with, and he'd say, yeah, I've been there, done that. His initial job, he worked for a wholesale distributing firm, was to go in and take stores that were the wholesalers sold food and turned those stores around. And the way he got started in the business is he hit a ceiling in terms of promotion, and the company said, well, we'll give you these 3 stores if you can save them. And he could do that. He was a genius at doing that. He had a knack for retailing, and he forgot more about retailing than most people will ever know in their entire lives. And all that being said, it's important that we understand that starting a business takes a lot of courage, okay, and skill. And so with this entrepreneur's investment, this person said, I'm going to take $64,000 and live on it, right, and see if I can get it going. Well, let's move on through the rest of this, and we'll see. Here's the sale price, and we have our fixed costs. So that gives us the total fixed costs. And then we have the total variable cost, that's per unit. We have the break-even units, and we have the break-even revenue. So we know we have to sell 1,147 units to break even, given these assumptions. Now, I've gone down here and we've put together a pro forma income statement. You remember when we did the case of City of Clintwood, okay, we looked at revenue less expenses, and we had some of these assumptions about expenses and revenues. You remember that? And we played with them to try to get to a point where we either had a zero balance or we had a surplus. And so we saw in that pro forma, and that let us do some forecasting, okay? And we learned about that. The value of these models, these pro formas, is that we can take a look and try to anticipate the future if certain conditions are operative, okay? Now this brings me to the whole point of why we put you through business school, so you'll be a good decision maker and hopefully a good leader. Good decision makers understand some things. First of all, they understand that the outcome of a decision is not black or white. It's shades of gray. You can make a decision and it can turn out really, really well, or really, really bad, or that's pretty much what I would expect. I wish right now I had the opportunity to, if I could get a year off and do any and be paid. If someone could pay me a year, I'd love to spend a year following Bob Stoops around as he starts his XFL football program team. He's, I guess, going to be a coach and an owner. This is going to be a new experience for him. And I'm assuming he's putting a bunch of his money in. And so he's taken a big step. If it had been me, I would have retired with my millions, travel a little bit, maybe do some analysis for Fox or something like that, but I wouldn't go get back in go coach and let him give you $12 million a year, but take your own money. He's got more guts than I do. So I'd love to be able to just shadow him for a year and just sit and listen and learn, because I know there's a lot, but I won't get that chance. Anyway, here we are. We have a pro forma. And the pro forma is pretty simple. I have the units sold, and notice that I have that range of possible outcomes. I don't sell anything. Is that possible? You bet it is. I at break even. I'm I sell about half as many as I thought I would. Not too bad. Then I sell as many as I think. Well, it's break even 1,147. Let's say I do 50% better, or I do twice as good. You said, well, Dr. Harmon, could I put it like 1.1 and break even and 1.2? Absolutely. I just did it in halves to keep screen space down and just to keep it simpler. But you can see that range of outcomes. Okay. At this point, I'm making a forecast. And look, I really don't care if you've been in business for a year or 109 years. When you forecast revenue, you better make sure you've really thought your way through it, because if you build a budget around forecasted revenues, in other words, you assume you'll have so much money and then you budget, you plan to spend it, you better make the money or it's a bad day and a lot of people get hurt. This is one of the things I've said to you over and over and over. Do no harm. Better that you under budget than you over budget. Okay? That you plan for expenses but revenue, but not what you thought. But so we've got this range of outcomes. And we can go through the performance. We say, okay, how much do I have in revenue? Well, it's simple. The revenue is the price per unit times the number of units sold. And you can see the same, and then we come to fixed costs, you know, so they don't change. Okay? Variable costs, if I don't sell any units, I have no variable costs. The bad news is, though, I have no revenue. Then I've got half a break even. Then I've got break even, 1.5 break even, and twice break even. Okay? So I see these possible outcomes I could experience. Now, as I come down, I've used conditional formatting in this very simple performa, but it shows me something. It takes me from, uh-oh, I'm losing $25,000 to, I'm losing $12,000 to, I'm treading water to, a little bit of profit here. I'm going, oh, okay. Okay? Now, again, the pro forma tells me how many units I need to sell at what price to break even. Let's pop over here to the, but I'm going to show you one final thing, and it's this. And I'm going to use some conditional formatting here as well. So I'll click Home, and I'm going to use conditional formatting. I'm going to color scale, and I'll do the green, yellow, red. You say, okay, what are you showing me here? I'm going to click in cell B36. And B36 is B34, the profit or loss, plus the entrepreneur's savings. That's what I call an economic profit or loss. So this entrepreneur didn't lose 25 grand by not selling any units. The entrepreneur lost 90 grand. And you can see, even if they break even, they're out the money that they lived on. Then we've got 1.5 break even and twice break even. This is a sobering reality. When you go to work for somebody, remember someone prior to your arrival had the courage to start that business and had the courage to stay with it. And it never ceases to amaze me that people think that running a business is an easy proposition. You see, I'm probably many times students' least favorite person to take a class with, because I probably give you the greatest amount of truth because I've seen it lived out. When people start a business and it goes down the tubes, a lot of people get hurt. And your first obligation is to make sure, to the best of your ability, that doesn't happen. Successful businesses are the result of a lot of hard work, a tremendous amount of thought and planning, and often some good fortune. So this is not for the faint-hearted. So if you go to work for somebody, respect the fact that they started that business. They took the risk so you can have a job, and respect that. and be thankful for it. And if they have you good benefits and all of that, be thankful that it's there. You owe them your allegiance. They're providing you an opportunity. Well, that being said, I want to take a few minutes and talk about this chart that I designed. Okay, and this is the Badger Jams break-even analysis chart. Now, you said I used a term a while ago, reverse engineering, to kind of figure out how a chart's put together. Yes, and so let's look at this chart for just a minute. I'm going to put my cursor right over here in the chart area, and I'm going to right-click it, and I'm going to say, okay, what kind of chart is this? Well, I'm going to click this Change Chart Type, and I'm going to find out. And this is a line chart with markers. How do I know? Well, it tells me it is. Okay? So I know the kind of chart that it is. It's a line chart with markers. Then I'm just going to go around the different pieces or components of the chart. I'm going to click here in this area, and I'm going to click Select Data. And it's going to give me the Select Data Source dialog box. Now you'll notice that the legend or the series is on the left, and that's the y-axis. That's the variable of interest, also known as the dependent variable, using research lingo. Then on the horizontal is the x-axis, okay? And that's the category or the independent variable axis. These are also most formally known as the ordinate and the abscissa. You go, oh, geometry, you're giving me the heebie-jeebies. I understand. Now, on the legend series, I have 3 series of data I'm tracking. The first is fixed cost, the second is total cost, and the third is revenue. Now notice I can move these up or down so I can rearrange them. And what I found it was best is to go, and I found as I developed this, is have fixed costs, then the total cost, and then the revenue. Now I can click on this fixed cost. You say, okay, where did that come from? And I'm going to click Edit, and it's going to give me the edit series for fixed cost. Now the top part of the dialog box is the series name. Notice I have Badger Jams, that's the name of the worksheet, and then A29, which is the name fixed cost. Okay? Now below it is the series values, and those are in the Badger Jams worksheet. That's what that Badger Jams in single quote with the exclamation point after it indicates. And cells B29 through F29 are the fixed costs, and it gives you the values. So I click OK. Now let's look at total cost, and we'll click Edit. The total cost, the name total cost, is from is cell A33, and then the series values, okay, are B33 through F33. And I could just use the grabber and drag across and get the data. And then I have the revenue. And I can click on Edit there, and I'll get the dialog box. Okay? And it gives me the name and then the series values. Now I also have the horizontal or the category or the axis labels. And in this situation, the key category is the number of units sold. So I'm going to click Edit and say, what's the axis label range. And I take those cells B25 through F25. And that's the unit sold. And those are the axis labels. Now, close this off for a minute. As we take our tour around this chart, right? Now I'm going to look at the axes for each of them. Well, let me stop. Now, I'm going to click the data series and I'll right click it. And I can select data. I can change, I can add data labels. I can add a trend line. I can have fill. I can use the outline for it. I can format the data series. And then over here in the axes, I can click on that and I can click select data. On the axis, I can format the axis. And I can do that for the horizontal as well. Then I have the series, and I can click format the legend. And I can, of course, move this around, enlarge it, etc. Now, and you probably did some charting, I hope you did, in the fitness in information technology course. And we'll click in here in the chart tools and click on the design, and it will say add a chart element. And that's where you can use an axis, primary axis, and a horizontal axis. I can put in axis titles and a chart title and where I want to put it. Okay? And it's a very simple chart, but it tells the story of, okay, how does it look? Well, fixed cost, there we are. It stays the same. Notice that up here, and I'm going to use my little annotator just to be fancy schmancy today. I know you get sick of it, don't you? Here we are. This is from this area up here is profit. This area down here is loss. This area here, right here, is break even. And hopefully you've done some work with that. Now, let's come back over here, and we're going to play around a little bit with a tool called the Scenario Manager. Now, as we look at this, the contribution margin tells us, that we're concerned that we have enough left over to change our fixed. We have to be mindful of our fixed costs for a simple reason. That's why we get the total variable costs. We know those will change with the level of sales. So we have to know, okay, how much am I getting out of each sale to pay the fixed costs? And let's assume they're starting up this business, and this fixed cost picture, let's say maybe we can do some work with it, okay? And let's talk about some things that I might be able to do. So I'm going to click on data. All right. And I'm going to come over here to the what if analysis. All right. And you'll see this thing called Scenario Manager. And let's click that. All right. And I'm going to click Add. And I'm going to call this base case. Remember, when I make a decision, it's not black or white. It's a range of possible outcomes, ranging from help me to praise the Lord, or okay, praise the Lord. The other is when I make a decision, I can have unintended consequences. Every time I make a decision, even if it has positive results, it can have negative impacts that I might not even be thinking about. All right? It's interesting to me. I see it in the LA Times and New York Times, and sometimes that there are people in Arizona now who are attacking driverless cars that are being tested. People are throwing bricks at them and shooting them, and it's crazy. An unintended consequence of a good thing. If you have a driverless vehicle or a vehicle that's autonomous and you're legally blind, your whole world has just changed. There's a very touching video over on YouTube that shows one of the early Google cars where a man who he's legally blind, but because that car can be programmed to take him, he can go to errands, he can go to work, he has semblance of a normal life. And it's a game changer for him. Okay? But automated vehicles also scare people. And they worry about people. And so this thing in Arizona where people are throwing bricks at them and shooting them and trying to burn them and all kinds of crazy stuff. It's an unintended consequence of a good, well-hearted intention. Let's lower our carbon footprint. Let's have vehicles that don't, we take as much human error out of as we can. Well, that being said, we get the base case here, and I'm going to do by changing cells, and it's going to be these cells: the rent, advertising, the commercial stove, and the cooking equipment. These are big ticket items that I had to spend to get in to the business. Anytime I start a new business or I say I expand a product line or anything, I have to absorb something called sunk costs. And what that means is I spend the money whether I get an additional sale or not. I spend the money whether I get an additional bit of revenue or not. So that's why they call it sunk cost. So I want to attack these because it's a lot of money. So I say, okay, so I've got my base case here, and I click OK. And it shows me the values for those changing cells, and this is my base case. I click OK. Let's say that let's say I go to the people I'm renting from and go, look, if you'd like to have me as a long-term tenant, here's what I'll do. If you'll drop this $2,000, I'll sign for a longer lease. Or I need $2,000 off this for me to make it. If I don't make it, you have an empty building on your hands again. Okay. So here's a situation where I say, all right, I'm going to add a new scenario, and I'm going to call this low. I'm going to call it lower rent. Okay, and I even have a place here if I want the scenario manager to put some notes. And I'm going to click OK. Now, the stove is the commercial stove, or was it lower rent? Let's see. I'm going to change the rent to $10,000. I can always go back. I think this is low rent. I'll click OK. Yeah, lower rent. Now, if I want to see what everything looks like, all I got to do is press show. It lowers the rent, and everything changes automatically. again, when I build those assumptions and I link them into the outcomes, i.e. the output area, I can see that much more readily. The scenario manager is a powerful tool because it lets me say, okay, well, what if this changes and what if this changes? And look, the more time you put into this, the thought process, the better off you'll be, precisely because we know that when we do something, there's a range of possible outcomes. I can't emphasize that enough to you. So you want to see what's it most likely to look like. And so I've got the lower rent. So I see what it looks like if I can get the rent lowered $2,000. And you could see as I scroll down here, I'm looking at a good change in results. So I got a question here. Let me look at it for a sec. How did I get the scenario manager in the toolbar? If it's not showing, you're probably going to have to you're going to have to use it as an add-in. And let me close this off for just a minute. And I'll show you guys. And this also is the way that you get Solver. Now, well, before I do that, make sure that you it's a great question. Make sure that you click the Data tab. Okay, and then you come over to the far right and you'll see the what if analysis. Did you click the Data tab and do you see the what if analysis? Let me know if you did. Okay. Okay, so it's not in your toolbar. All right, let's do this. This is a good question, and I'll stop for just a second. And if I want to have an add-in like that, it should be there, but I'm going to click File, and I'll come down here to Options. All right, and I click Add-ins. And you'll notice that I've got inactive add-ins I'm not using, and then I have active add-ins. The Analysis Tool Pack, the Solver add-in. You should have the Scenario Manager, the What If analysis over there in your Excel file. If you don't and you're using Office 360, that may be the issue. I'm not sure. Okay, good. Got that issue solved. Listen, that's a great question, and I appreciate that. Good question. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to close that jewel off, and we're back here, and we're doing the Scenario Manager, okay? And I'll go back here, and What If analysis, and I'll do my Scenario Manager, and here it is. I have these two scenarios. One of them where I have the base case, and the other, then I have lower rent, and I can look and see what that looks like. And so I'll come down here and I'll see, well, I have to sell fewer units. Okay. Now let's say that I get them to drop the rent $2,000, and I say, okay, the next item I'm going to attack is the commercial stove. Now listen, smart people, before you spend the $25,000, go and try to get the best deal, okay? And so you have a commercial stove. So I'm going to click on the What If analysis and the Scenario Manager, okay? And I'm going to click Add. And I'm going to call this lower lower cost rent and stove. And as you could see here, if I want to, I can put some notes or a comment. If I want to provide even more explanation, but I'm going to lower cost of rent and the stove. So I've been living right. I'll click OK. And I lowered the rent to 10 grand, and I got the commercial stove. I got a price break on it, and I got it down from 7,200 down to 6,500. Okay. And I click OK, and boom. Now I want to see, what does it look like? I've got the rent lowered, and I got a break on my stove, my commercial stove. And let's see what this looks like. And we'll show it. And now I can come down, we'll close that off, and I can look at it. I can see, wow, the break even now is I've gone from 1,100 units to 1,000. And you can see it's going to be a lot easier for me to sell 1,000 units. If we go back to the original assumptions, and that's simple to do, I just go back to what if analysis. I click the scenario manager, okay, and I click base case, and I show it right back there. Isn't that nice? This is all designed, as I've said before, so you, the decision maker, can look at possible outcomes before you actually plunk your money down and bet on a horse. Okay, and look, you have the ability here to kind of look at what would be the possible outcomes. So before you do all of that, now I remember my father could walk in a grocery store and he could tell you what was wrong and what was right. He just had a gift. He wasn't a normal human being. He was a freak. And he could just see this. I've got to go in and I've got to do this and that, look at that. And I still might not get it right, okay? And in the 5 years I was at Southeast Missouri, when I worked in that small business development center, trust me, I saw about every kind of business you could start. And we worked with entrepreneurs who had just about every type of problem. And it was an education for them and for us. It was a great experience. And often the great part was the entrepreneurs, we had grants and gifts that paid for the programs. The entrepreneurs didn't have to pay anything. And they would often come into our classes and speak with students and about the realities of running a business and being a business leader and what all that entails. Well, all that being said, I've got the scenario manager and I can see these outcomes, and you can see I can work through them and start to figure out. But let's talk about this for just a moment, the realities. And I'm going to close this. Now, right now, I'm projecting that to break even with the current original conditions or assumptions. I'm going to sell 1,147 cases of jam. Let's put this into a more realistic or more thinkable number. So this is going to equal 1,147 divided by 52. And I had too many equal signs in there because I was so excited about showing you this insight. I got to sell 22 cases a week. I got to sell 3 cases a day. Now, the jam is probably a seasonal product, so I might sell a ton of it at Christmas time. And then, and it doesn't look like this is a retail operation. This looks like somebody who's selling this stuff. And they have their van or their truck or their pickup or their car, and they sell it. I'll never forget, I had a guy who was, he sold, he sold some kind of tool that was used by electricians. And he sold the things all over Southeast Missouri. So every electrician in that part of the state he was their supplier, and it was a brand name product. I don't remember what it was, but they had to have it, and he was the brand name distributor. And I remember he said, well, okay. Well, he came over to meet me, and we did an additional interview. 2 or 3 of us were working with him, and he said, well, why don't you come over to my office? We're all grabbing our coats and stuff, and he walks. He says, no. My office is in the parking lot. He opens his trunk, and there's his stuff. So he's working out of the trunk of his car. But he's very successful. But he said, I'm not going to pay for an office and all of that. I've got a phone. And in those days, you had you guys don't even know what those are, beepers. You might have had one when you were an infant. There's a little thing that would beep and tell you've got a phone call. And you could look at it and tell you the number. And the guy said, I've got my phone. I have my secretary. I carry her with me. It's my beeper. And I've got my car is my office. And you could tell he lived in his car. He worked his car. It was filthy. He'd eat and drive and all over. And I just laughed. But I thought, this guy's smart because he knows that he doesn't have an office. He's not putting himself in a hole. And he was doing pretty good. Okay, so we're doing a distributor thing here. So one of the things you might say is, okay, well, let's go see Walmart and see if we can get involved with them. If you do, Walmart will dictate to you how much you'll make, when and what price you'll charge them, and how much they'll take. And see it. And to become one of their vendors, you become part of the family. Unfortunately, some vendors feel like that they are locked in the cellar and can't get out and are fed bread and water. And there are a lot of people that do business with Walmart, even big companies that really don't like doing business with them. But they're a platform. Now, since it's jam, you could try, maybe, I don't know, you could try sell it, Cracker Barrel or somewhere like that, or you could go just place to place like a peddler and sell it. But you've got a manufacturing facility, and you are paying for shipping it, so you're hoping you ship a lot. Okay, so this is the reality, and I'll just tell you a quick war story. I always tell when I do this case. We had a guy who decided he would become the car wash king of Cape Girardeau, Missouri. I'll never forget this. And he decided he was going to use an automated car wash. Okay, you drive through it, and he was going to have 3 of them. Now, this is in a town of 30,000 people. Okay, and an automated car wash is a big capital expense. It costs a lot of money to put one of those things in. And if something breaks and you got to get repaired, you really have an issue in your hands. Well, to make a long story short, we looked at that, and we looked at the numbers, and we called people called people in St. Louis that were in the business, and it was obvious this guy hadn't talked to anybody. He wanted to be the king of car wash. And we came back and said, we've got some numbers and figures, and we don't have the population here to sustain 3. At the time, we talked to some people up in St. Louis. I remember talking to a lady and her husband. They were car wash kings in St. Louis. They had 4 outlets, and they were struggling to make it. And St. Louis is a big town, and they had the 4 outlets in 4 different places. So I said, the numbers don't support this. They don't justify it. Maybe this isn't what, maybe you ought to rethink this and ratchet it down. I said, maybe you ought to have the car wash and keep your day job because you had a good job, you make more money, and have it there and kind of do it on the weekends. And, have somebody there in the day that watches it, and you watch it on the weekends, and he said, I'm not doing that, I'm going to quit my job. And we talked with him, and it became apparent there was no point in talking to him. And I let it go. Okay. Well, I saw him a couple of years later at a party, and he said, I owe you an apology. And I said, what do you owe me an apology for? He said, I told you guys you're just a bunch of stupid professors. He said, you were pretty smart because the numbers weren't there. He had gone and gotten a loan. He knew somebody at the bank. and he lost everything he had. Now listen, I don't take any great comfort or glee in telling this story. It was tragic. I felt terribly, terribly bad. I didn't tell him, you should have listened to us. I felt awful because he lost everything. He quit his job, he had a good job, he lost tons of money, owed everybody, and it didn't work out well. So if you're going to be an entrepreneur or you have that dream, make sure you remember, step into the water gently. Okay, I'll give you a good example. My dad's older brother, my uncle, he worked and he made clocks, and he loved to make clocks. He made and he loved making the great big tall clocks. I never bought one from him because he wanted too much money. I went and did price comparisons, and he called me and said, "Why don't you buy one for your dad? He wants it." And I said, "I'll buy one for my dad, but I'm not buying it from you. You charge too much." And he laughed. He said, "But it's a high quality design," which it was. But he did his day job and kind of worked on his clocks. And then when he retired and had a pension, okay, he built clocks and shipped the silly things all over the country. So if you're going to do that, be smart. Sit down with an entrepreneur. Find out what they went through. Go talk to somebody like McDonald's and say, what does it require? What do you require for me to be a franchisee? Because they've already traveled the path. They know what to do to be successful. But more than that, this case, if you don't do that, should help you have a very healthy appreciation for the people you go to work for. Because somebody somewhere at some time started that company that now provides you a job with benefits like we saw in the Guardian Roofing Payroll, all those nice benefits you have. Okay? So appreciate that. Be thankful for that. Okay. And this case ought to help you do that. All right. Plus, again, these models, these approaches are powerful things, especially when I can do like I use the scenario manager and I can say, well, what would it look like if I do this? And we did the same thing with the city of Clintwood. What would it look like if I did this or I did that? Better you try to do some planning and say, well, here's how bad it could get, or here's how good it could get. Then you just launch into something and you really haven't given it enough thought. Because remember, you and I are normal human beings, and we may not have just the intuitive ability to see this. Okay. Now, look, I know there are people out there 19, 20 years old. I kick myself every day when I think, why wasn't it me that thought up Uber? Hire people and let them drive people around. Or why didn't I think of Airbnb? Or I kick myself and go, well, it just wasn't something that happened. Okay. So, all of that being said, you can use this file to upload for your workshop credit, okay? And you could also and let's look now at the second file I talked about, and this is the Lemonade GS. So I'm going to close this. All right, and this is the Lemonade GS file. And it's there in the files in Canvas, and it relates to over here in chapter 18, figure 18, figure 1, and figure 2. And we're going to use the goal seek, okay? Which is a very simple but very, very nice little tool. Let's open up the file, and we'll take a look at it, okay? And here we are. We have the price, we have the demand, i.e. sales, the unit costs, the fixed costs. You say, boy, this sounds familiar. Here's the revenue, and we've been working the name manager, okay? And let's click on formulas and the name manager, and we've been working that name manager, okay? So we have the demand, we have the price, we have the unit cost, the fixed cost, the revenue, and that's demand times the price. The variable cost is the unit cost times demand. And so we have a break-even figure down here, and we know, for example, and because we've used the name manager, we know that revenue minus fixed cost minus variable costs, that gives us the profit. And here we're at break-even units. So we know we got to sell 17,647 units at $3 to break even. Okay? Now, earlier when I was with the other section, I kind of carped a little bit and griped about this thing. And look, I don't know why they've got 4 digits. Maybe the textbook explains it, but I'm going to decrease the digits, the decimals. And I'm just going to take it down to how you sell that parts of a unit. I'll have to go back and read the case. Maybe they're right. I don't know that you sell half of a unit of anything. You sell a unit. Okay, so we know, and look, anyway, even if you do, it still shows up here in the formula bar. So if you're such a purist that you need to see it carried out 8 decimals, my congratulations. Excel feels your pain when people like me come and round it up. All right, now let's say, okay, now I said, well, what would I have to do in terms of how much would I have to sell if I want to make $5,000? Yeah, okay, simple enough. It's going to be pretty easy for me to do that. And I'm going to click data, and it's the goal seek to the rescue. Okay, now I'm not going to give you my go thing. I won't do that. I promise. You don't hear it, and I don't want to do it. My throat's, you can tell. But I'm going to set the cell. Here's my target cell, D7, and I'm going to set it to 5,000. I want to make $5,000 by changing the amount I sell. How much of this do I have to sell to make $5,000? I'll click OK, and there it is. And it shows me I've got to sell 19,608 units to make $5,000. And you say, okay, Dr. Hartman, could I sell what it would look like to make $1,000, 10,000? To your heart's content, yes. Now, here's what I would do. If you were doing a report for somebody, I'd do the goal seek, okay? I'd take a print screen of this and embed it in that Word document, and then they can see each one. That's what I would do. Or I just say I've run the goal seek, and here's what it looks like. And so make a profit of $5,000. And that's really all that's going on. Now, we'll go back here and let me diminish this down. And we'll cancel that. So we'll go back to the original figure there. And I'm going to diminish this. And let's go back. And I'll raise this back up. And here they show us, all right, these are the data. And then they show us the goal seek, and they set cell D7 to 0 because they want to know what would they need to do to get a value of 0. In other words, a break-even point by changing cell D2, which is demand. How many units do they need to sell at that price to be at break-even? So it's a nice little tool. Now, just so that you know, upcoming attractions, and I'll open this back up over here. We have incoming attractions. We're going to work with the third what if analysis tool, and that's the data table. And I'll show you how to use the data table, which is, again, another one of those tools that's helpful for us in looking at possible outcomes. What are our options? Okay? Well, I'm going to stop here for a minute and see if somebody has any questions. Any questions that you might have? Anybody? No one? Now, one of these days, I'm going to resort to clicking on Manage Participants, which you can't see, but I can, and clicking on names and saying, hey, are you there? And if you're sitting there listening to Kanye and eating bonbons and playing frisbee with the dog and not paying attention, it'll be embarrassing for you. Not for me. But a good question today about that tool there. So seeing that you have no questions, I think we started a little bit early. I'm going to call it a wrap. Now, don't forget, you can upload, you can, to get the workshop credit, you can upload one of these two files we worked on today, or you could go back into and upload the key, this file. Now you say, okay, here's a question. Oh, okay, campus is closing at 3:15. All right, good enough. Here's the final thing. On Thursday, I will do a screencast, whether I'm with you or not, depending on the weather. Here's what will happen. I will cover exam 1. Okay? Fair enough. Yeah, thank you so much. Everybody stay safe. Great. Thanks, folks. God bless you. Be careful out there. And I'm going to shut us down here.